Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Here we're talking about Unit 2, Lesson 2, Exploration 3 and 4. We're going to combine 3 and 4 together. Exploration 3 here is going to talk about ATP, which is our usable energy, how we're, it's basically our energy currency. And then Exploration 4 is going to talk about how are we going to move things in and out of the cells, and it's going to talk about the cell membrane. So that's kind of going to piggyback with ATP. So first thing is chemical energy. Our body, we are going to trap energy inside of molecules, inside of chemicals. And our job is to release that energy and then use it properly. So as we scroll down here, chemical energy and ATP. ATP is going to be our primary form of how we're going to use energy. It stands for adenosine triphosphate. And it's a high energy molecule that contains within its bonds energy that cells can use. So what I want you to think about is, think about you having money and going to a store and using it. Well, ATP is your body's money for energy. If you have ATP in your cells, you have energy to use. And we always need to be having energy because everything that our cells do is going to require some sort of energy in order to function. So here's an example of how we're going to make energy. This elk is exactly like a human or any other organism that is going to eat their energy in the form of sugar. So this organism is going to take in oxygen. It's going to take in glucose. When it does that, it's going to go through cellular respiration. And cellular respiration is why we exhale carbon dioxide. So what's going to happen is this organism is going to take the energy in glucose. Glucose has chemical energy stored in these bonds. What's going to happen is it's going to release heat, but it's going to make ATP. And we're going to talk about this when we go over cellular respiration in class. But it's also going to release water, which our body uses, but then it's also going to release carbon dioxide, and that is why we inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide, is we're trying to release that energy. Here's what ATP looks like. There's an adenine, there's a ribose, but then there are 3 phosphates. And these 3 phosphates are going to be important because this has energy, it contains energy. But then we're going to talk about losing this phosphate. And when we lose this phosphate, it's going to go to what we call ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate, which means it only has 2. And then we're going to release that energy. So as we come down here, here's the graphic showing that. When we have ADP and we add energy, we are going to get ATP. We add this phosphate. But then when we want to release that energy, we're going to take this ATP and we're going to cut off this phosphate and we're going to go back to ADP. And here, so when we break that bond, that's where we're going to get our energy. And that energy is going to be released. It's going to allow us to do all sorts of exercises and all sorts of voluntary and involuntary activity. So as we go through here, ATP is going to be something that we talk about over and over and over and over again. Okay, so it's going to be important for us to understand. All right, so let's go to Exploration 4, which is going to be a little bit longer, but this is where we're going to talk about the cell and how it's going to move things in and out of the cell, because we know that cells need to be able to move energy and oxygen and carbon dioxide through our bloodstream to get to every single cell, and being able to get in and out of it is very important. So the cell membrane, if we click on the 3-dot definition, it says that it's a double layer of phospholipids that forms a boundary between a cell and the surrounding environment that controls the passage of materials in and out of the cell. That last part is very important. Our cell membrane is going to have what's called selective permeability, and that's going to allow certain things to go in while keeping other things out, and that's what's going to help us stay healthy. So as we scroll down here, here's a graphic of what it looks like. And we looked at this graphic back, I believe, in Unit 2, in Exploration 2. But here are the heads of a phospholipid. Remember, these are hydrophilic. What we call hydrophilic means water-loving. And these tails on the inside are what we call hydrophobic. So the water is going to be found outside the cell and inside the cell. There's going to be water. And that's why we need these hydrophilic heads on the inside and on the outside, and we keep these hydrophobic tails on the inside so they're not in contact with water. And it scrolls down, and then what you'll find is you'll have a protein called a channel protein, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You're going to have all sorts of different types of proteins that are going to be allowed to bring things into the cell. So it talks about some proteins embedded in the phospholipid bilayer transport materials across the membrane. That's going to be these. It's going to help transport molecules across the membrane that we need in and out of our cell. Okay. There's also going to be things that we talk about as called identification tags. And that's these things. Some of these yellow carbohydrate chains are actually going to form identification tags, which allows cells to identify with other cells. Okay. So as we scroll down, it says the structure of the cell membrane is going to give it the property of selective permeability. And that is very important because it's going to allow some things in, but it's also going to allow keep some things out. It's our defense system as we move forward. So how do we move things in and out? So passive transport. Passive transport is very important because it is going to move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. And all that means is how many molecules there are outside, other than water, outside or inside of the cell. So here we've got a graphic that shows there, if this is outside of the cell and this is inside of the cell, there is a higher concentration on the outside, because if you look, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 purple ones, but there's only 2 inside. So 11 is higher than 2, giving us a higher concentration on the outside. Now on this one, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to 3. 9 is still higher. 3 is still lower. What that means is the molecules want to try to balance out. So it's going to move from an area where there are more, a higher concentration, to an area where there are less, lower concentration. So you see these arrows. These molecules are going to go through the cell membrane like this. Here's another one. This is a different type of protein. But notice that there are more blue ones here, less blue ones here. So these are going to go this way, area of high to low. We call this passive transport. Passive means we do not need energy, right? And these molecules are going to go from an area where there are more to where there are less, and they're going to try to balance out. Okay? So diffusion is that movement of molecules across. When one of these purple molecules goes from outside to inside, we call that diffusion. Now we have another term right here called facilitated diffusion, and all that is when a molecule moves from an area where there is more to an area where there is less, but it uses a protein. If it uses a protein, that means it's facilitated diffusion. What you're going to find out is some molecules are going to be able to go straight through the cell membrane very quickly. But other molecules are larger, or maybe they have a specific receptor, and they're going to have to use the protein. So as we scroll down, okay, we talked about facilitated diffusion as a use of that protein, but we also have a little graphic here. So here is a graphic, and I'm going to hit play, of facilitated diffusion. And as you can see, these molecules are going to be too large to just go through the cell membrane, so they have to use this, what we call channel protein. And this channel protein is simply that. It is a channel that goes through, and it's three-dimensional. Think about like a tube, okay? Because our cell membrane is completely surrounding the cell. So this is like a tube, and these molecules are going to find it and be able to go inside, okay? So that's facilitated diffusion. Now, as we keep scrolling down, we got a few other things that we're going to talk about. So osmosis. Osmosis is when water is what's moving across the cell membrane. We move water so often in our body. Our water is consistently moving. Okay, so it has its own name, osmosis. But all osmosis is the diffusion of water. So what's happening here is we have a barrier right here. And this barrier is not allowing these molecules to pass through. But what happens is it's a percentage. And so if we look over here, the water level is equal, but there are way more purple solutes over here. So the percent of water is lower and the percent of solutes is higher. Over here we have the same amount of water, way less solute, so therefore the percentage is lower. Well, what's to happen is water can pass through this membrane, but the solute cannot. So what's going to happen is we're going to change the percentage of the solution by moving water. So what's going to happen, you can see the water level has gone up. we still have the same number of purple dots on each side. This is the same, and this is the same. But the thing is that the percentage is equal because we have more water and more purple dots, and we have less water and less purple dots. So if over here the percentage was 90% water, and over here was 98% water, what we're going to do is we're going to go back and forth until we get to 95%, right? I said 90 and 98%. So we're going to try to get to 94%, which is the middle. And so what may happen is more water comes up and it increases the percentage. That's osmosis. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is active transport. And active transport is where we move a molecule across the cell membrane. I'll click on the dot, but it has to go from an area of low to high concentration. So what that means is that we want to force molecules in where there's already too many. So here you see all of these in here, all of these green molecules, but we want to get more of them in. Maybe this is glucose, and we have a lot of glucose in the cell, but maybe it's a muscle cell, and we want to get more in. So what we're going to do is we are going to be able to do that, but we're going to have to use energy. So here you see the molecule come fit in there. It's going to go to an area of higher concentration, so we have to use energy. And here comes ATP. We're going to lose, and there it goes, and it forces that in there. Okay, and they're going to do it again. It sits down in there. In's going to come ATP. It's going to lose one phosphate, go to ADP, and then let it through. That is active transport, and it's where we go from an area of low concentration to high. Now, there are two ways that cells can get very large molecules in, and one of them is called endocytosis, is how they get molecules in. So if you look at the graphic here, this molecule is going to force in and push itself on to the cell membrane. The cell membrane is actually going to surround around it, and when these touch right here, it's going to create this little vesicle that this is going to go in through. And then once it gets in the cell, the vesicle breaks apart, and now this molecule is inside the cell. So it pushes in, forms it, and then breaks that little cell membrane down. This is called endocytosis because this particle is going in. Now, the other side of that is exocytosis. So what happens is when our Golgi apparatus makes a vesicle, it's going to go out to the outside edge of the cell. It's going to merge right here. And when it merges, it then becomes part of the cell membrane. And so then it just forces it out. There's our vesicle. It's now becoming part of the cell membrane. And now this is going to go out. So that is exocytosis. Now that concludes our Exploration 2 and Exploration 3. Hopefully you followed along with it. We are going to have a test here soon, and want to make sure that you guys are really understanding what we're doing. So thank you guys for joining me today, and once again, I can't wait to see you in class.